Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest example of Tory austerity as Boris Johnson's government refused to provide the funding that had previously been supplied by the EU. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, although the government keep denying that they are persisting with the austerity that they began in 2010, the economic definition being difficult economic conditions created by government measures to reduce public expenditure. I mean, not only is that page one of Conservative economic policy through the ages, but it's been actively pursued in relation to Brexit. In this video, I'm going to discuss the situation in Wales because the Welsh government have been raising this issue recently. While we were still in the EU, the figures from the Welsh government for EU funding that they were given to allocate to various projects was £680 million a year. Boris Johnson promised to match EU funding after we left. You know, with all those membership fees that we'd be saving. Except we were also supposed to be using that money for the NHS. Not quite sure why people didn't smell a rat when he was promising the same money for two different things. Should have been obvious that it wouldn't actually have been used for either of them. It's just going to be used for paying back Tory donors. We know this. So the proportion of EU money that used to go directly to devolved governments, which isn't the whole amount, but what I'm talking about in this video, ended last year as we left the transition period. You may have heard recently of a bit more EU regional development funding still coming into the country. Essentially, as far as I can tell, the EU asked if we'd still like some money for things, or are we good now that we're saving loads in membership fees? And the government appears to have said, yeah, we're still a little bit skint. Not sure what happened to the money we saved. We think Michael Gove may have been using it to pay back his dealer or something. Could we have a little bit to tide us over? No problem, said the EU. We also heard you like flags. So here's some EU flags for you to fly wherever you use this money. Is that all right? Yeah, okay. But the money allocated to devolved governments has stopped. So how much is Boris Johnson stumping up to replace it? Is it more, as he promised? You know, because Brexit is so great that we're going to be raking it in soon? No, not exactly. So how much is it? Well, there are really two answers to that question. The first one is zero, because we're 7 months in now and nothing has actually been paid. And there isn't even a plan for how to allocate any funding at all. 7 months after the EU funding stopped. The second, more charitable answer to the question is £800 million over 4 years. That's an average, of course, don't know, but you could say £200 million a year on average, couldn't you? But hang on a minute. The Welsh government was given £680 million a year by the EU, and the UK government are only going to replace that with £200 million a year. Is that right? Actually, no, that's not right. That's not what it is at all. Oh, thank goodness. That £200 million a year is for all three devolved governments. That's Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland. Right. So it was already less than a third compared to EU funding, and now it transpires the money is to be shared between Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Now, I don't know how much Wales will get out of that, because like I said, the government still haven't explained how they are to spend this much smaller amount of funding. So right now, what they're actually replacing that £680 million a year with is zero. Zip, zilch. But let's say they allocate it according to, say, population per capita. That's not how you'd expect it to be allocated, because the EU funding was allocated according to need. But as the government haven't actually said how they'll distribute it, let's just go with population as some quantitative measure which may be used. Now, if that were to be done, the funding that the Welsh government was allocating to various projects, which from the EU amounted to about £217 per person, would drop to £19 per person. Now, if you suggest that Wales will actually get a bit more allocated per capita, because it's most in need, you'd still be talking a hefty drop in funding. At the moment, we're talking about a drop in funding of over 90%. And remember that when the government does decide how it's spending this money, it's only for 4 years. The EU funding would have been for as long as it was needed. And that is both Brexit and austerity in a nutshell. It's going to cause severe hardship because that money was used where it did the most good for local economies. And it will make what little funding does emerge less efficient. So this was brought up. A Welsh minister, Vaughan Gething, made the point that regional working requires collaboration. But this system was making local authorities bid against each other. He said Wales has less say over less money. And the same is also true, of course, of Scotland and Northern Ireland. This is all part of the power grab that Johnson instigated, which Ian Blackford of the SNP brought up repeatedly in PMQs. You had to sort of laugh. When the article, relayed this quote, they also quoted the government as saying that the Shared Prosperity Fund will help to level up and create opportunity where it is needed most. I mean, we're 7 months into Brexit. Where is it? Right now, the funding has stopped. Where's the replacement? Even if the government were going to try and pretend that it could allocate funds better than devolved governments, which is a nonsense, they are promising much less money and delivering none. They went on to say that they'd been engaging with stakeholders in Wales since 2016 to identify opportunities. Fantastic, great. So why haven't you published your plan then? In fact, it should have been published last year and put into operation on January the 1st of this year. Right now, we don't even have the plan, much less the implementation. If they've been working with stakeholders for 5 years now, why on earth isn't anything being done? The article also ended with a quote from the government promising that each nation of the UK will receive as much, if not more, from the new funds as they would have by remaining in the EU. And this is where, although I've said before, I'll say it again, the Financial Times is good at giving you the facts on things like this. It doesn't always point things out as clearly as it should. The facts are all there for you to see. But like I said, they lobby for money in this country, not the public interest. They should have ended the article by making that quote, but then reminding their readers that this is in direct contradiction to what has been promised and what has been provided. Right now, if we'd still been in the EU, the Welsh government would have been allocated at least £680 million of funding for this year. Might have been a bit more, new budget, inflation, all the rest of it, but at least £680 million of funding. That doesn't include direct EU funding for things like farm subsidies, regional development, which is also gone. £680 million to be allocated by the Welsh government where it thinks it will do most good in its local communities. Right now, the UK government have provided them with nothing. That is not the same or more. That's nothing. And we're more than halfway through the year. So that quote is an objective lie and should be reported as such. Then we have the promise of £800 million over 4 years for all 3 devolved nations. Per year, that is less than a third of what went to Wales alone. So even when the plan is announced, and who knows when that will be, when it is, if those figures are still accurate, that will still represent an allocation of funds much, much lower than they would have had in the EU. It will be less than a third if Wales get all of it and Northern Ireland and Scotland nothing. So what we have here, predictably, is an extra form of austerity resulting in Brexit. We were already getting austerity because that's how Conservative governments operate economic policy. Even though modern economics has debunked the concept of austerity as not fundamentally working. It's never worked, ever, whenever it's been tried anywhere in the world, anywhere in history. Rishi Sunak's first move when he became Chancellor was to tell departments to restart austerity by cutting their budgets. He had to put that on hold when the pandemic hit, but he's currently engaged in a battle for the finances now and wants cuts again. We would face further cuts to public spending anyway because tax receipts would be lower with higher unemployment and more businesses going under thanks to a combination of the pandemic and Brexit, and the government are not going to skimp on paying back their donors. 2022 could be a very bad year, which is why the government seem to want a general election before too many of their chickens come home to roost. But then we have this extra layer as well. The EU funds that were used where it was most needed, targeted, that we're talking about, used to boost local economies where it was most required. Now they're getting no funding at all, just promises of less funding. That's what they're getting. No funding with a promise of less funding that they used to have. Just another Brexit consequence that needs hammering home before we let people go to the polls again. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.